Let's go over multiplying binomial by binomial or trinomial. We are going to do distributive property, but there's a special term called FOIL. So F stands for front, O stands for outside, I stands for inside, and L stands for last. So what is this FOIL? This FOIL only works when you're multiplying binomial by binomial. It could be plus or minus, doesn't matter. So what it is that, so first, A is multiplying with C. So front and front, which is AC. And then front with outside, which is A times D. Next, we have inside and inside, B times C, BC. And then last, inside with last, plus BD. Oops, yeah. So do you notice that FOIL is only when you only do it when you have binomial, two terms, times binomial. Okay, so let's put this into a practice. So number 1a, we have a binomial, n plus 5 times n minus 6. So I will be doing FOIL, front, outside, inside, and last. So do you notice that n is handshaking with n and negative 6 in the other house, and 5 is also handshaking with n and negative 6 on the other house. So pretty much everyone is handshaking. So let's start. N times n is n squared. N times negative 6 is negative 6n. 5 times n is positive 5n. And 5 times negative 6 is negative 30. And just by looking at it, it looks like I do have a like term, negative 6 and positive 5n. But rest of it is not a like term. So I can collect the like terms. So n squared, negative 6 plus 5 will give me negative 1. So negative 1 is invisible, and minus 30. And that's how you do FOIL. Okay, multiplying two binomials. So let's try another example, letter D. So in this case, I just see one binomial, but there's a square. This square means that there's two of it, 3x minus 5, and then 3x minus 5. So when I have two binomials together, we must do FOIL. Front, outside, inside, and last. Okay, 4 arrows in total. So 3x times 3x is going to be 3 times 3 is 9, x squared. 3x times negative 5y is negative 15, x times y, so which is xy. So we have negative 5y times 3x is negative 15 xy, same thing. I put it in alphabetic order. And then we have negative 5y times negative 5y. So negative becomes positive 25 y squared. Okay. And as you can see, we do have a like term, negative 15xy and negative 15xy. So we can definitely put them together. So 9x squared, negative becomes more negative because you're subtracting. Negative 30xy plus 25y squared. And that is your final answer. Okay. Now lastly, let's take a look at letter E. Letter E, you have binomial with a trinomial. So when you have binomial with trinomial, we're not going to do FOIL, but we're going to do something similar to FOIL. So what it is that 2t must handshake with everyone in the house, on the other side of the house. So 2t is going to handshake with 4t, negative 2t, and positive 1. Okay, so 2t is done handshaking with everyone in the other house. Now it's 1 turn. 1 is going to handshake with 4t, with negative 2t, and positive 1. And it's finished. Okay, so it's very similar to FOIL, but just think about sort of distributive property. So let's collect the like terms, do the distributive property. So 2t times 4t squared, 8t, because there's invisible 1, so you add the exponent, t cubed. And then 2t minus 2t, negative 4t squared. 2t times 1 is plus 2t. So we are done the arrows for the top. Now let's do the bottom arrows. So 1 times 4t squared is 4t squared, and then negative 2t and plus 1. The like terms here, we have negative 4t, like term with 4t squared, and we have 2t, like term with negative 2t, and that's it. So 8t cubed comes down automatically, and these two cancels out. Negative 4 and positive 4 is just 0, and 2t and negative 2t is also 0. So then plus 1. And that is your final answer. Okay. And lastly, example 2. So find an expression for the area in the rectangle below. So I will help you guys get started. So find the area is length times width. So the length in this case, I could say this is length and this is width. So it's going to be x plus 2y times 2x plus 3y. Now we have two binomials, so we will be following the FOIL. Front, outside, inside, and last. Okay. So therefore, x times 2x is 2x squared plus 3xy. So that's above the arrows, which we're done. Now let's do the bottom arrows. Plus 4xy plus 6y squared. That's the bottom arrows. And notice how we do have a like term here. So 2x squared plus 7xy plus 6y squared. So that is the area of this rectangle. Okay. Now this worksheet number 2 is just an extension. So the answers are posted on the Google Classroom with step-by-step. So I would recommend that you try them sort of like a challenge to yourself. Okay, so we will be incorporating the measurement unit with. Now lesson number 6, now we are going to look at dividing a polynomial by monomial. It's same rule. So when we're dividing it, we are subtracting the exponent. So for example, when I have am divided by an, when you have a same base, we are subtracting the exponent and the base stays the same. So letter number 1a, we are dividing. So I'm going to do the numbers together, and then x together, y together, and z together. So let's do the numbers first. It's what's negative 30 divided by negative 6. It's 5. And then x4 divided by x1, there's invisible 1. It's x4 minus 1, which is 3. And for y, we have a same base, it's dividing. So it's going to be exponent 8 minus 2, which is 6. And for z, 2 minus 2 is 0. Now keep in mind that exponent to any of 0 to any base is always 1. So z to the 0 is technically 1. So your final answer will be 5x3, y6. Okay. Now what about letter C? So we are going to do this separately because it's adding and minus. So we're going to do this, and this division separately. So 12 divided by 3 is 4. And you always subtract the same base when you're dividing. A squared and b squared cancels out, right? They're exactly the same. Plus 3, 9 divided by 3 is 3. A, 4 minus 3 is 1, and b. And minus 6 divided by 3 is 2. And a3 cancels out. You're left with b squared. And that is your final answer. Now, but what if you were to be given division that are not separated? So what you need to do is make sure you do division for each term. So what I'm doing is I'm going to show you step by step. So negative 3x is over negative 3 plus 9 over negative 3. So notice how I divided into term 1 and term 2. So therefore, negative 3x divided by negative 3 is x, and positive 9 divided by negative 3 is negative 3. And that's how you do it. So don't forget, when you just have like a division, you always have to apply to each term. So let's try letter E. So I have 3 terms here and a 1 term at the bottom. So I have to divide for this term, and this term. So let's start with the number. Negative 3. There's invisible 1 here, negative 1, right? So negative 3 divided by negative 1 is 3. And then a squared divided by a squared is just 0, right? It just cancels out. And then b squared divided by b is b. So that's for the first arrow. And then next, positive 5 divided by negative 1 gives me negative 5. a3 divided by a squared is a, and b cancels out. So that's my second arrow. And next, negative 4 divided by negative 1, negative becomes positive, so positive 4. A squared divided by a squared, it's just same thing, it cancels out. And b also cancels out. So therefore, my answer will be this expression over here. Okay. Now, if you want, you could write it in order. So you could write negative 5a plus 3b plus 4 if you like. Okay. Good. Number example 3, it says determine the greatest common factor. Now we will be doing factoring in the later unit, but common factor, it means like what is a number that goes into all the terms, and you're choosing the number that is the greatest number that goes into all the given terms. So for example, for number 3a, look at the numbers first and the variable. So for number, we have 8 and 16. Now what number goes into 8 and 16? Well, we know that 2 goes into 8 and 16. 4 also goes into 8 and 16. And 8 as well. But the greatest one is going to be 8. So 8 is my greatest common factor for number. Now for variable, you always choose the lowest exponent. So in this case, my lowest exponent, we have x squared and x. So therefore, the variable is going to be x for the greatest common factor. So therefore, what's my greatest common factor for these two terms? It's going to be 8x. Now let's try letter C. So let's try the numbers first. So what number goes into 7 and 2? Well, if you do your multiplication, no common number goes into 7 and 2. They're not the multiple of each other. So in this case, it's just 1. No any other number other than 1. Now for variable, again, like I said, it needs to have a same letter and the lowest exponent. So for x, they both have x, but the lowest is x3. They both have y, so that means the lowest must be y2. And they both have z, and the lowest exponent is z1. So my greatest common factor here is 1, invisible 1, x3, y squared, and z. So you will be doing that for homework for worksheet number 4, for which is division. Okay. Now lastly, for lesson number 7, it's about factoring. So a factor is a number or a term that divides evenly into each term of a polynomial. So when the question says factor, you want to put it in the brackets. That's our goal. Okay, and you want to start off by finding the greatest common factor for both number and a variable. Okay, so again, let's try it. Number 1a. So we are given two terms here, 5x squared, term 1, and positive 35x. So let's start with the number. For the number, what is a number that goes into both 5 and 35? Well, the greatest number is 5. 1 definitely goes into 5 and 35, but we want the greatest number. Okay. Next, for a variable, they have to have a same variable and the lowest exponent. So in this case, they both have x, but the lowest exponent is x to the 1, so it's x. So my greatest common factor here is going to be 5x. So you write it down. And how do we get inside the bracket? Well, let me show you. So what we're going to do is we're going to do something called a division. So when we have 5x squared plus 35x, write down your greatest common factor, which is 5x. And we're going to put it in brackets. Bracket, okay? So I need to have two terms here because I have two terms. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide. What's 5x squared divided by 5x? So it's going to be 5 and 5 cancels out. I'm left with x. And then next, what's positive 35x divided by 5x? It gives me positive 7, and x cancels out. And now, there you have it. We just factored and put it into a bracket form. So I know it's going to take some practice. So let's do some practice question for number 2a. So when the question says factor, always start with the greatest common factor. And we are going to divide each term by the greatest common factor. So in this case, for greatest common factor for number it looks like it's 5. Or no, actually 10. 10 goes into 10 and 20. So 10. But for variable, there's no common factor because 20 doesn't have x. So 10 is the only factor. And now we are going to divide each term. So what's 10x divided by 10? X. Negative 20 divided by 10 is going to be negative 2. And that's your final answer. Okay. So if I want to double check, what you could do is you could do distributive property, opposite of factoring, which is expand. So if I were to expand this, you get 10x minus 20, which is the question that you just started with. So that means you did the factoring correctly. Okay. Now, what about letter D? It's starting with a negative number. We don't like negative. We don't like to start with negative. So every time you see a negative, please factor the negative first. And then the common factor for number is just 1 and 1, so 1. And then for variable, there's the lowest exponent is m1. So then bracket. So negative m squared divided by negative m is positive m, and positive m divided by negative, so positive m divided by negative m, cancel, you're left with negative 1, so negative 1. And there you have it, you just factor that. What about letter E? So letter E, I'm starting with negative here, so again, you're always factoring the negative first. And for number, we have 10 and 25, and it looks like 5 is going to be the greatest common factor. And for variable, x, the one with the lowest exponent. So let's try. So what's negative 10 divided by negative 5? Positive 2. And x squared divided by x is x. Next, what's negative 25 divided by negative 5? It gives you positive 5. And x divided by x, it cancels out, and that's your final answer. Okay, now let's do one more. So letter I. So it looks like we have 3 terms here. 1, 2, and 3. So let's find a common factor for numbers first. So what number goes into 35, negative 21, and 7? Well, it looks like 7 goes into all 3 terms, and that's the biggest number that goes in. And then for variable, it looks like all of them have a and b, but we have to choose the one with the lowest exponent, so a is 2. And for b, the lowest exponent is 1. There's 1 here, so b1. Bracket. So let's start dividing. So 35 divided by 7 is 5. And then we're going to start subtracting the exponent. So a squared, b squared. And negative 21 divided by 7 is going to give me negative 3. A and b cancels out. That's great. And then 7 divided by 7, it becomes positive 1. And then a and cancels out, so I'm left with b. So I will just replace it with 1b. So 1 is invisible, and you close a bracket. So you can double check by doing distributive property to see if you get the final answer, or double check inside the bracket and see if there's any other greatest common factor. But as you can see, there's no number or a letter that goes into all 3 terms. So that means you did it correctly.